Chapter 1. Morning like a movie. The house woke like a stage before the lights. A click of the kettle, a sigh from the heater, thin winter sun sliding across the dining table where crayons and a paper crown spelled Flower Queen in wobbly letters. Daniel pressed a pale blue shirt on the board he kept by the window. The iron exhaled in soft, even breaths, the cloth going smooth under his hand. From the hall mirror, Mara fastened a pearl to her ear, pausing at the small tremor in her fingers that nobody else would notice. Tiny socks scuffed down the hall. Rosie swung into the kitchen in a tulle skirt and yesterday's glitter, the long braid thudding her shoulder like a bell rope. "Granddad, look!" She tilted her head so the silk ribbon caught the light. Daniel set the iron upright and crouched. The braid felt warm and alive as he tested the knot. "Strong as ship rope," he said. "Captain approved." Rosie saluted, then scrambled onto a chair. She reached for the crown, then thought better of it and folded her hands like a practiced flower girl. On the counter, a baking sheet of cooling muffins ticked softly as they let go of heat. Outside, a delivery truck groaned and faded. Lila appeared in the doorway, all cream wool and precise lines, hair pinned into a sleek chignon that announced "Do not touch." She smiled, bright, a beat late. "Morning, team." Her tote slid from her shoulder to a chair with a soft thump of weight. A slim black case peered from the top, its edges squared like a tool meant to be useful and invisible. Mara clocked it without moving her head. "New kit. Emergency stuff," Lila said too quickly, crossing to the kettle. "Pins, steamer, stain pen. You know how photos are." Her hand rose to smooth the same strand of her bun again and again, thumb rubbing a shine into nothing. Daniel poured orange juice, clink of glass on wood. "It's a party, not a courtroom," he teased. Lila's smile held. "Flyaway's ruin photos," she said, lighter now, like the line had been rehearsed. From the living room, Ethan's laugh spilled with the sports anchor's chatter. Then his footsteps, quick. He kissed his mother's hair and swiped a muffin without breaking stride. "Car in 10, he said, the words landing on the table with the authority of a checklist. He squeezed Lila's shoulder gently as he passed. "You look," he stopped, eyes softening. "You look like today." Rosie slid off her chair and twirled, skirt puffing. "Do I look like today?" she asked the room. Lila crouched to eye level, smile tightening into something close to careful. "You look perfect," she said. "Just don't touch your hair, okay? Not once. Promise." Rosie nodded, solemn, palms flat on her dress. Phones hummed on the counter. Lila's lit first, planner, photos before speeches. "Hair must be perfect." She locked the screen with a snap, the sound small and sharp as a pin dropped on tile. Mara's phone vibrated next. She glanced, then set it face down, breath shallow, the pearl at her ear suddenly heavy. Daniel caught the movement and let it pass. He knelt to Rosie again, retied the ribbon with the steady patience of a man who'd laced 1,000 skates. "We are fortified," he declared. Rosie leaned into him for a heartbeat longer than usual, the way children do when they feel weather shift. Coats came off hooks. Scarves threaded through collars. The house, so recently full of the soft industry of mourning, began to empty its sounds. The iron unplugged, the kettle stilled, the radio silenced mid-joke. Mara took one last sweep of the table, gathering crayons, tucking the paper crown into her tote beside tissues and a mint tin. Lila lifted her own bag. The slim black case slid, caught, stayed. At the door, Rosie hesitated. "Will the band know my song?" she asked, suddenly small. "They'll know every song you bring them," Daniel said, offering his hand. She took it, trusting the answer more than the words. Cold air rushed the hallway when the door opened. Tires crunched old frost on the driveway. In the brief quiet before they stepped out, the house seemed to listen. Lila's thumb found the zipper on the black case and drew it shut. Zip, a thin, decisive sound that hung in the space like a held breath as the door clicked behind them. Chapter 2. The venue breathes. Cold air stitched their cheeks as they crossed the driveway. Doors thudded, seatbelts bit, heater fans rose from whisper to hush. Daniel drove behind Ethan's car, watching the bride's cream coat in the rear window like a small, steady flag. On the radio, a morning host laughed at his own joke, then surrendered to static as they dipped under the river bridge. Rosie traced little hearts in the fog of her window and wrote her name backward by accident. The brick mill rose from the water like a ship run aground. Tall windows, iron fire escapes, a flurry of vendors and boxes. Inside, warm air smelling of rosemary and steam wrapped them. Edison bulbs blinked awake one strand at a time. The band tuned, bass-like heartbeat, a trumpet clearing its throat, a piano purring under careful fingers. "Family room upstairs," the planner sang, appearing with a clipboard as if conjured. She was all black clothes and bright eyes, a conductor ushering chaos into form. "Lila, hair check in 5. Thin the candle test. Rosie, you and I are going to meet the cake." Rosie's hand tightened on Daniel's. "Cake," he promised, a binding contract in one word. Ethan kissed his mother's cheek as he passed. 58 candles, he said, already headed for the dining room. 60 if you count the bar. "Count the bar," Daniel called, deadpan, and earned half a laugh from his son. Upstairs, the bridal suite was a bright box of mirrors and steam. Lila unpacked her tote with a methodical speed that read like panic in slow motion: spray, pins, stain pen, steamer, lint roller. The slim black case she placed on the vanity as carefully as a relic. The planner hovered. "Shot list?" she asked. Lila flipped to a page with tiny boxes ticked in pencil. "First look with bouquet, then straight to the ivy wall. Family photos before speeches. I want them clean." Her hand rose again, smoothing the same invisible flyaway. The motion kept returning, ritualistic. Mara pretended to study the view but tracked Lila in the mirror, the thin white line at her lip where she'd pressed too hard, the shallow breaths disguised as just busy. A text stumbled onto Lila's screen. "Planner. Confirm. Hair perfect before photos." Lila locked the phone instantly, smile flashing like a sign misfiring. "They're obsessed today," she said to no one. The black case reflected her jaw in a small, dark rectangle. Downstairs, Daniel walked Rosie through the dining room like a museum, linen-draped tables, low bowls of eucalyptus and winter roses, the long head table set just so. He lifted her to see the cake, pale tears, sugar flowers, a ribbon that almost matched her own. "It's like a mountain you can eat," she whispered. The pastry chef laughed softly from behind the display, then turned away, pretending not to eavesdrop on reverence. Back in the suite, a makeup brush tickled Lila's cheek. The steamer breathed at the hem of her dress. Mara set her tote beside Lila's and gently unfolded a linen napkin to lay out a pearl clasp that needed tightening. A single hair, dark, fine, had clung to the napkin from the kitchen and now rested there, a tiny curve on white. Lila's gaze snagged on it mid-sentence. For the smallest beat, the room fell around that filament. Mar didn't move. "Button hook," she murmured to the stylist, as if the napkin mattered only for jewelry. The stylist rummaged. The planner poked her head in. "Timing," she sang. "First dance at 6:10, family photos immediately after. Less chance for flyaways." "Understood," Lila said, voice flat as glass. She reached out, casually, too casually, and pinched the napkin's corner as if to straighten it. Mara's hand met hers halfway. The contact was light, the message wasn't. Lila withdrew, mouth tightening into something like a line drawn with a ruler. Across the hall, Ethan bent to a candle, lit, then lifted both hands to feel for an air current. The little flame stood still. He smiled despite everything, proud of a small success no one else would notice. Daniel watched from the doorway, Rosie's braid warm against his wrist. "Engineer's son," Daniel said. Ethan looked up, softened. "Warrior's son," he answered, and blew the match out with a breath that trembled more than the flame had. "Family photos in 5. The planner called down the hall, a bell disguised as a sentence. Mara's phone buzzed in her tote, once, then twice. She slid a fingertip to the screen. Subject: confidential results. She locked it without opening, air caught behind her collarbone. In the mirror, Lila saw the notification reflected, just the shape of a bold subject line, and her throat worked, one hard swallow. The steamer sighed. The band below tried a bright chord and let it spill into a softer one. Lila lifted the slim black case and felt its weight as if it could tip the room. "Emergency kit," she said to the stylist, to the mirror, to the invisible judge in the glass. No one asked what was inside. The case answered anyway when she snapped it shut. A crisp, insect click that made Rosie pause at the threshold and look up, unsure why the sound felt like a door closing inside a larger door. Chapter 3. The First Fray. The click of the slim black case was still hanging in the bridal suite when the hallway filled with the soft traffic of a wedding finding its rhythm, heels on varnished floorboards, garment bags whispering, the band below throwing a bright scale into the rafters and letting it dissolve. "Quick adjustment," the planner said, reappearing like a cue. "Clipboard up, smile steady. Light is perfect against the ivy right now. 2 fast family shots before the room opens, then the full set after first dance." She pinged the timeline with her pen. 5 minutes. Lila's eyes flashed, brief relief, then calculation. "Good," she said, smoothing her skirt. The hand that kept visiting her bun rose again, thumb traveling the same invisible path. Rosie, at the threshold, watched that hand as if it were a metronome telling her what stillness meant. Downstairs, the mill breathed warm, rosemary from the kitchen, lemon oil, a curl of cigarette from the loading dock sneaking in and being scolded by clean air. Daniel carried Rosie down the staircase on his hip, counting the steps under his breath because it steadied both of them. 22, 23, he whispered. She echoed, small and proud, 23. The ivy wall waited like a set. The photographer, a man with a patient smile and a camera that looked heavier than his wrists, toggled dials with a fingertip. "Let's paint a little story," he said, coaxing. "Grandparents, parents, flower queen." Rosie brightened at the title. Mara squeezed her hand. Lila arrived in a wake of steamer scent and hairspray calm. The planner checked buttons and angles with practiced tenderness, like a flight attendant buckling the sky. "Hold her chin up just a touch," the photographer coached. Rosie lifted, presenting the braid. A curl had betrayed her, a question mark against her cheek. Lila's gaze latched onto it. The muscle in her jaw twitched once, a struck match beneath skin. Mara unfolded the linen napkin she'd tucked earlier, dabbing a shy crescent of frosting from Rosie's lip, a relic from the cake tour. The napkin stayed between Mara's fingers like a soft white flag. Lila's eyes cut to it, quick as a secret. "Beautiful," the photographer said, stepping in. 3, 2. A server rolled a tray behind him, a careless clink of glass. The shot paused on the inhale. In the stutter, Lila rocked forward half a foot, reflex, correction, and then stopped herself, fingers flexing open and closed at her side. She stepped back, smile fixed. Mara's phone pulsed in her bag, a heartbeat on a table nearby. Subject: confidential results floated bold and rectangular on the lock screen. She didn't touch it. The decision not to touch became a thing with edges. "Reset," the photographer said, gentle. "Again, tilt." Rosie tipped obediently. The braids slid, the ribbon loosened a whisper. Daniel caught it, retied, the knot sure and modest. "We're fortified," he murmured, the same joke, and this time Rosie giggled. Lila didn't. Her eyes flicked to the slim black case on the corner of the draped cocktail table, placed there 5 minutes ago with ceremonial care. The case was closed, small, obedient. It might have been a glasses case. It might have been anything. The band let a bass note roll up the stairwell, a hallway hum that found everyone's ribs. The first guest drifted near the doorway, the earliest of the eager, coats over arms, voices low, heads tilting. "Oh, there they are." The planner widened her stance, a traffic officer conducting joy. "Last one," the photographer promised. Rosie's chin trembled from being brave. Ethan took a half step toward her, then stopped, reading Lila's line of fascia-tight calm like a stop sign. He swallowed and smiled instead, teeth pressed into a careful curve. Relief shook out in little shivers, shoulders dropping, breath returning. The planner clapped once. "Perfect. We'll finish after first dance." She checked boxes on the clipboard like making rain official. Lila exhaled through her nose. "Thank you," she told the photographer, eyes never leaving Rosie's head. Close, the braid looked like something alive and willful, a vine you politely prune. Rosie slid down from the step stool. The room shifted around her height, suddenly adult knees everywhere. She reached for Mara's hand without looking, found it, squeezed twice. Mara answered twice, a code they invented when night terrors were a phase. Daniel took in the room the way stagehands do, the rigging, the sight lines, the exits. He noticed the tray of water glasses sweating on linen, the way the condensation outlined circles that would become evidence of joy. He noticed Lila's hand hover over the black case and then retreat, as if the case were hot. "Shall we peek at the cake again?" he asked Rosie, keeping his tone a soft landing. She nodded, distracted by her own reflection in a brass sconce, turning her head to watch the braids swing like a pendulum. They moved as a small, private constellation through the swelling crowd. Compliments scattered. "She's an angel, look at that hair," landing on Rosie's shoulders like confetti she wasn't sure she wanted. Lila ghosted alongside, smile calibrated, eyes flicking between the braid and Mara's bag, as if both were ticking. At the bar, a glass cracked in a bartender's wet hand, an ordinary mishap that made 3 people flinch. The sound faded into chatter, into a joke, into the band leaning into a standard everyone knew. Mara set her tote on a quiet end of the head table and pressed her palm flat atop it until she could feel her pulse answer her. She breathed in through her nose for 4, out for 6, the drill she taught other people for years. When she looked up, Lila was already looking back. 2 women, either side of a truth, neither moving. The planner's voice arrived like a bell wrapped in velvet. 10 minutes to doors. She pivoted to Lila, soft command beneath kindness. "You can relax, for this part." Lila nodded and didn't. Another curl escaped Rosie's braid and rested on her cheek, making a small shadow. Lila's fingertips lifted, then stopped midair. The case on the table seemed to hum though it made no sound. The photographer raised his camera to capture candid smiles and caught, instead, a tableau. A child with a shadow on her cheek, a mother-to-be by marriage accounting for every hair, a grandmother standing very still, and a grandfather holding the small weather of a family in the crook of his arm as the room inhaled for the first dance it hadn't realized it was approaching. Chapter 4. Candles, cameras, clues. The room held its breath, then exhaled into music. The band slid from warm-up to melody, a ribbon of piano over brushed snare, bass walking like an old friend. Doors opened, guests fanned in, a rustle of coats, a sparkle of glasses, low appreciative hums at the flowers and the glow. "First dance," the planner murmured into her mic, not loud, but the room obeyed. Ethan offered his hand to Lila. She took it, posture flawless, smile bright enough to light a table. Up close, Daniel could see the small geometry of stress in her neck, a pulse climbing too fast. They stepped onto the floor. The bulbs cast honey over them. The photographer backed up 3 paces, lens breathing between his hands. "Beautiful," he coaxed. "Stay with each other. Right there." Mara stayed at the edge with Rosie, who pressed both palms to the rail and watched as if the dance were a secret adults finally decided to share. Her braids swung with the bass. A new curl worked free, comma-soft on her cheek. On the head table, Mara's phone lit again, insistent but polite. Subject: confidential results. The rectangle of bold text reflected faintly in the water goblet beside it, as if the message now lived in glass, too. Mara didn't touch the phone. She watched the floor, the edges of the floor, the places people pretend not to look. Ethan whispered something to Lila. Mara caught only the shape of, "You okay?" And Lila's smile flickered, then steadied in its frame. She lifted her eyes beyond Ethan's shoulder and found Rosie. A reflexive hand rose toward Lila's bun and fell again, stopped midair by the memory of a hairpin. Applause skimmed like skipstones when the song gentled to a close. Ethan dipped Lila. Her laugh landed on time. The bandleader, sensing the room's ease, curled 2 fingers and gave the rhythm section a nod for something lighter as the couple stepped away. "Family photos in 5, the planner called softly, already moving into position. "Ivy wall, then speeches." Lila's smile reset. "Before anyone gets sweaty, she told the planner, voice thinner now. Before flyaways. At the rail, Daniel retied Rosie's ribbon with slow hands. Hold still, sailor, he said. The knot firmed under his thumbs. The photographer's second shooter, young, hair in a loop, framed a candid, grandfather's big hands, small head, ribbon, light. Lila was already scanning. Her tote sat under the head table. The slim black case had migrated, when? To the linen-draped cocktail round near the ivy. She drifted to it on plausible errands, thanked the florist, straightened a napkin, and set her fingers along its spine like testing a fever. The zipper tab glanced against her ring, a tiny metallic ting hardly larger than a punctuation mark. Mara followed the sound with her eyes and recognized it not as curiosity but as inventory. She palmed the linen napkin she'd used earlier and, without ceremony, dabbed a faint smear of frosting from Rosie's lip. When she lifted the napkin away, a single hair clung to the edge, light caught on the filament. It would have been nothing on any other day. Today it became a decision. She folded the napkin once, twice, ordinary, unhurried, tucked it into her tote beside mints and a pen. Lila watched the motion with a stillness that read louder than footsteps. Her thumb touched the black case's zipper again and drew it shut. ZZIP. The sound buzzed through Lila's teeth. Positions, the photographer called, genial. Parents here, grandparents flanking, and our flower queen up top. Rosie climbed the little stool like a mountain. The band softened to a hush, leaving only the low room noise. A cough, a glass on wood, someone's shoes brushing the floor in a small private dance. Chin up, the photographer said. Perfect. The curl on Rosie's cheek refused the command, an elegant defiance. Lila's mouth flattened by a millimeter. The planner leaned to Lila. Do you want the stylist to? I'll handle it, Lila cut in, too fast, too bright. No one touches her hair. The beat. The planner nodded, stepped away. Daniel felt Rosie straighten under the attention. He gave her a tiny wink he'd been giving her since she was 2. You and me, kid. She leaned into the joke with a tight little smile. Mara's phone pulsed again. Confidential results. The letters seemed to press up against the glass as if they, too, wanted air. She inhaled, counted, exhaled through her nose. Not yet. Ethan approached the group, ties slightly loosened by the dance. He touched Lila's elbow, gentle. After the pictures, we breathe, he murmured. She nodded without nodding. Lila's hand hovered over the black case. She slid it half an inch closer, then snapped it open as if merely checking contents. Inside, nested in foam, a slim cordless clipper lay like a tool dreaming of utility. She brushed the power switch with her thumb, an accidental test. A half-second of tinny hum bloomed and died. The second shooter glanced up, brow knitting, then smoothed it away. The sound had been so small it might have been imagined. Ready, the photographer sang, stepping back. 3 click. Applause from a table in the corner, someone's private joke landing, spilled toward them and faded. The planner checked her watch. One more, then speeches line up, she said, already pivoting to the mic stand polishing. Mara adjusted the ribbon on Rosie's shoulder, the knot held. In the stillness between instructions, Daniel heard the radiator somewhere in the building crack and settle, an old bone clicking back into place. He thought of all the small noises that keep a structure honest. Lila closed the black case and placed both palms on either side of it, like bracketing an answer. When she lifted her head, her eyes found Mara's. No mask, no script, just the naked, flaring panic of someone who believes she is about to be unmade by a napkin. What are you doing? She whispered, not moving her lips. Keeping her clean, Mara said, matching the stillness. That's all. Again, the photographer called, patient as tide. Hold it, click. The pictures were perfect. The room didn't know yet that it had stepped 1 inch closer to a cliff. The band took a breath. The microphone on the stand caught a flicker of feedback, a faint ghost of what was coming, then went quiet as the planner smiled into the hall and invited everyone closer, closer, as if nearness could keep anything from breaking. Chapter 5. The Stool. Closer, everyone, closer. The planner smiled into the room, palms open, drawing bodies toward the mic stand. The band softened to a hush that felt like velvet laid over wood. Glasses chimed faintly as servers reset water. The invitation traveled outward like a small tide. People drifted in, laughing low, coats folded over chair backs, heat building gently around the head table. Lila didn't move. The word closer seemed to stick to her skin. She glanced at the ivy wall, at the little wooden stool still parked there like a period at the end of a sentence, and then at Rosie, whose braids swung as she whispered something into Daniel's shoulder. On the linen round beside the ivy, the slim black case waited, obedient rectangle, zipper tab catching light like a tooth. Speeches after this, the planner told Ethan, clipping a tiny transmitter to the mic, the cable a neat black vein. The mic breathed a filament of feedback and went quiet. Ethan exhaled, rolled his shoulders once, and reached to squeeze Lila's hand. 2 minutes, he murmured. Before speeches, Lila answered, voice bright and brittle, we need one more of Rosie alone. She smiled at the photographer as if they'd agreed on it already. Child window closes fast, she added, a phrase that sounded like something from a manual, something you say when you want the world to obey. The photographer blinked, then nodded. He knew the truth of it. Flower Queen, he called gently. Rosie perked up. Just you, sweetheart. Up on the little perch. Daniel set her down. The braid thudded softly against her back. She walked to the stool with the ceremony of small courage and climbed, knees first, hands planted, then pivoted to face the lens. She lifted her chin because that's what the nice man asked before, because being good at this meant being still. Mara drifted 3 steps to the side, finding a clean sight line, bag close. Her phone pulsed within, confidential results bright on black, a heartbeat she could see through leather in her mind. She slid her palm over the flap as if smoothing a wrinkle from a dress. She kept breathing in 4, out 6. She kept her eyes on the child. Gorgeous, the photographer said. Tiny bit down. There. A curl slid free and landed soft on Rosie's cheek, a comma again, asking an unanswerable question. Rosie didn't feel it. She was busy with the horizon. Lila saw only the curl, nothing else, the whole room reduced to that shadow on that cheek. Her hand rose, stalled, hovered at shoulder height like a glitch. Do you want me to? Mara began, already lifting the corner of a fresh napkin. No, Lila said too quickly, then softened the word to sugar. I've got it. She crossed to the cocktail round. Fingers on the slim black case. The zipper made a small zip that sounded louder than the mic had. She flipped the lid with a motion that tried hard to look ordinary. Inside, nestled in foam, the cordless clipper gleamed. Its plastic was matte, practical, the kind of tool wedding stylists carry for last-second necklines, stray curls, groomsmen who forgot barbers. It had a right to exist here. It looked innocent in its purpose until it wasn't. Lila, Ethan said, a warning folded into her name. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch her. His eyes asked, what are we doing? Her eyes did not leave the child. I said no one touches her hair, Lila replied without turning, but the air around the sentence shook. It's one strand. It ruins lines. We fix it, we move on. Then use a comb, Mara said, level, present, the napkin still in her hand like a flag that refused to be weapon or surrender. We're fine. Rosie sat very still because the room had turned into a held breath, and children know when breathing wrong breaks things. She watched Daniel's face. He made his easy face for her, the one with the corners of his mouth that said this is a game. She tried to believe him. At the bar, a bottle hissed as someone broke a seal. The bandleader looked at the planner and lifted his eyebrows. Hold? The planner nodded without looking, attention fixed on the tiny stage she had not planned for. Lila slid the clipper from its cradle. The weight found her hand like it had been there before. Her thumb traced the seam without meaning to, as if the plastic might offer a different answer under touch. She stepped toward the stool, smile painted back on, the good kind, the one her clients buy. Sweetheart, she said to Rosie, gentle as cotton, we're going to make you even more perfect. 1 second. Rosie's eyes flicked to Mara, then to Daniel. Mara didn't move. Daniel gave the smallest nod, the one that means I'm here. He saw Lila's knuckles white around the handle and understood nothing and everything at once. Lila, Ethan said again, closer now. Stop. We cannot have mess in the photos, Lila said, and the word mess landed like a diagnosis. Her thumb slipped higher, nearer the switch. The photographer lifted his camera and then lowered it. The second shooter's hands fell to her sides. The planner took one step, then stopped. This was family territory now, a coastline with signs warning rocks, currents, do not dive. Mara spoke without moving toward or away. You don't need to do this. Lila's eyes flared. For a flicker, something naked surfaced, fear, not vanity, panic, not control. She looked, fast, at Mara's tote, at the napkin inside, at a ghost of a hair that maybe clung there, at the idea that evidence could be gathered at any moment. Her breath hitched. I do, she whispered, and only Mara heard the pronoun's true object. Silence held. The band let one sustained note die into wood. A server froze with a tray at hip height, glasses sweating little rings. Lila lifted the clipper to Rosie's head. Her thumb hovered over the switch, trembling. Everything in the room leaned forward a fraction, as if the building itself were about to speak. Chapter 6, The Whir. Lila's thumb found the switch. A small, insect hum bloomed against the hush, thin as a mosquito at your ear, and suddenly the only sound that existed. It vibrated up the metal of the stool, through Rosie's shoes, into her shins. The bandleader's hand froze midair. The bass player left a note hanging between finger and string. A server stopped with a tray hovering inches from a table, water beading into perfect, anxious pearls. No messy hair in my photos, Lila said, voice sugar over steel, and in the bright smile you could hear teeth. Lila, Ethan's warning was all breath. But her body had already decided. She stepped in, gripped the braid low, right at the nape where baby hairs fuzzed like a halo. The clipper warmed in her palm. The hum grew a hair louder as if courage. Rosie tried to turn toward Daniel's voice. It's okay, kiddo, but Lila's hand held her chin to the horizon. 1 second, Lila promised the room, to no one and everyone. The first pass was up the back of the head, a clean bite through the underplate. The sound, soft, apologetic, was worse than anyone expected. Hair spilled in a dark ribbon, slid from the blade, and puddled on the stool like something startled and fallen. A second pass, higher, because the first made a ragged path. Perfection requires follow-through. The hum skimmed skin. Rosie's breath stuttered, caught, then broke on a sob that was more humiliation than pain. Everything else happened at once and very slowly. The band snapped into silence, as if the room had signaled cut. A fork somewhere struck a plate and rang too long. The photographer's strap slipped off his shoulder. The body of the camera thudded a dull, defeated sound against his sternum. The second shooter's mouth made a small. Someone inhaled and forgot to let it go. Rosie launched. Off the stool, off the plan, straight into Daniel's chest with the single-minded force of a child heading for shore. He caught her hard enough to grunt, arms making a cave around her. Her face disappeared into his suit. Hot tears bled through cotton, a blooming, irregular circle. Oh, baby, he said, words falling out with his breath. Oh, I've got you, I've got you, I've got you. Lila stood with the clipper held away from her body like a live thing she didn't dare set down. Her smile remained a second longer than her certainty, then died. She glanced, reflex, knife quick, toward Mara's tote on the head table, the linen napkin tucked neat inside. Her throat flicked in a hard swallow. Ethan stepped between his wife and the stool, palms out, not to block, to anchor. What are you doing? He asked, voice low and shaking. What did you just? It was slipping, Lila said too fast. It would have ruined everything. Someone needed to fix. She lifted the clipper to show the tool the way people show a receipt, proof that action was reasonable. Mara did not raise her voice. She set the napkin she still held on the nearest linen, a gesture so gentle it bent gravity. Her face was very still, the kind of still that absorbs and decides. Her eyes moved once, clipper, braid, Rosie's small body shaking in Daniel's arms, then Lila's empty smile trying to reassemble itself. The planner took a half step, then respected the border. The bandleader lowered his horn to his thigh. Guests, sensing the difference between gossip and harm, backed themselves a polite 2 feet, giving the family a circle of air. "Sweetheart, breathe with me," Daniel murmured into Rosie's hair, or where hair had been, matching his inhale to hers until her shoulders hitched less. He fumbled his tie loose one-handed, wrapped it around her head like a soft pirate bandana, ridiculous and tender, a signal to her that she was not naked where the blade had traveled. Ethan looked at Lila, then at the coil of hair on the stool, whole, obscene, already gathering static to cling to the wood. "You could have asked," he said. It came out small, as if the question were 10 years late. Lila opened her mouth, closed it. The clipper buzzed in her hand, forgotten. The sound was suddenly unbearable in the quiet. The second shooter reached and clicked it off with a tiny, merciful movement. The hum died, leaving a vacuum where it had been, the absence louder. "I didn't," Lila began, then stopped, whatever sentence she had rehearsed failing to fit this shape. Her eyes tracked, involuntary, to the tote again, to the napkin, to the idea of what napkins can hold. Her fingers flexed around the silent tool. Mara lifted her gaze to meet Lila's and, for a beat, they saw each other without props. Not bride and mother-in-law, not stylist and witness, but 2 women standing on either side of a line. "This isn't about a curl," Mara said, soft enough that only the closest heard. "Not anymore." A breath shivered through the room like a breeze in a closed chapel. Someone at the back whispered, "What happened?" And someone else said, "Shuh." Rosie, hiccuping, lifted her face from Daniel's coat. "Am I?" She couldn't find the word. Daniel found one for her. "You are brave," he said. "That's what you are." Mara stepped once toward the mic stand and once toward Lila, choosing neither, stopping where both paths could hear her. The planner didn't move to stop her. The room had already decided who would speak next. Mara drew a breath as if the air might resist, then let it go in a steady line. When she spoke, the bandleader straightened, the photographer lifted his camera and then lowered it again, and even the radiator in the old mill seemed to hold still to listen. Chapter 7. The Stillness After. For a breathless beat, the whole building listened. Mara's inhale threaded the silence, even and measured, the way you breathe for someone who's forgotten how. Down the corridor a radiator ticked and held. The bandleader's trumpet gleamed under the Edison bulbs, mute against his thigh. A single curl of steam from the kitchen wandered through the doorway, smelled like rosemary and heat, and seemed almost embarrassed to arrive now. Daniel felt Rosie's heartbeat against his chest, rapid, bird-fast, each thud imprinting a small, damp circle on his shirt. He kept his arms a shelter, ties snugged pirate-style over the raw stripe Lila had carved. He rubbed slow circles at the base of her neck and matched her breathing until her shoulders softened by a fraction. "In," he murmured into the crown of her head, "like we're smelling cookies. Out, like we're blowing on a dandelion." Across from them, Lila's hands hovered stupidly in the air, one still cradling the dead clipper as if it might wake and explain what she'd done. Her smile had drained to the edges, leaving a flat line that made her look younger and also older. Hairspray hung in the light like glitter in water. She blinked hard once. Twice. Her gaze kept snapping, Mara's tote, the napkin, the braid on the stool, like a moth battering against 3 different bulbs. Ethan positioned himself between Lila and the stool without touching either, palms open, a human traffic cone. His chest rose too fast. A tremor ran under his jaw and vanished when he swallowed. "Lila," he said, not loud, not angry, as if volume might break the little that was left unbroken. "Look at me." She did, briefly, and he saw something naked in her eyes, panic pitched to a frequency only dogs and husbands hear. Then her focus flicked, helpless, back to the napkin. The planner stood on the edge of the circle she hadn't planned, headset cord black against her throat. She did not try to smile, did not make a joke about timelines or flyaways. She shifted one step to shield the family from the nearest cluster of guests, palms out, shepherding them back with soft, apologetic nods. The staff understood in their bones and leaned into quiet, trays lowered, steps softened, a bottle set down without the celebratory pop. The mill's old bones took the cue and settled. The photographer lifted his camera on reflex, caught the tableau in the glass. Grandfather bent like a cliff over a child, grandmother standing very still in calm water, a bride with a tool in her hand and terror in her mouth, then lowered the camera because there are pictures you only take with your eyes if you want to be invited back. Mara moved exactly one step forward, exactly the distance between escalation and mercy. Rosie, she said first, because all the adult architecture had to be rebuilt around a child. Do you want water? Her voice made space around the question. Rosie shook her head into Daniel's chest and hiccuped. Napkin, Daniel murmured, a language between long partners, and Mara reached for one without looking away from Lila. She did not dab at tears. She tucked the square beneath the tie at Rosie's nape to catch what salt would do to skin. Thank you, Daniel said to Mara, and the normalcy of gratitude steadied the table legs of the moment. A guest at the back whispered, "Should we?" And someone else answered, "Give them air," and the whisper moved down the line like instruction. Lila's grip whitened on the clipper. She set it down as if it might burn the cloth, then thought better and lifted it again, indecisive hands betraying the mind's spiral. It was slipping, she tried, finding the earlier alibi like a rope in the dark. The ribbon, she kept touching, the sentence trailed, a path that didn't lead anywhere useful. Her eyes found Mara's face and stuck there. You were going to, she couldn't finish that either. I was going to wipe frosting off her mouth, Mara said, mild as weather. She didn't blink. Ethan's head turned a degree toward Mara. The words, "What is happening?" formed behind his eyes and stayed there, unspent. He looked at the braid on the stool and it looked back. Ridiculous, obscene, the exact weight of a truth you can't yet carry. The bandleader slid his trumpet onto a stand with two careful fingers and, with the other hand, made a small circle in the air. Hold. His bassist nodded, loosened his shoulders, kept his hand on the instrument as if holding a pulse. Rosie's breathing evened to something human. She wriggled one damp hand free of Daniel's jacket and pressed it to the tie knot at her head like testing a bandage. It's silly, she whispered, a tiny laugh catching on the word. Silliest, Daniel agreed, leaning into the game. Pirate Captain rule. The second shooter, young, earnest, took 2 steps toward Lila before stopping herself. Do you want me to get the stylist? She asked, voice pitched at the softest possible register. The planner shook her head once, almost imperceptibly, not ours to fix. Mara tilted her chin, like a judge inviting the next witness to speak. Lila's throat worked. You don't understand, Lila said, and it wasn't defiant, it was a confession, an exhausted plea. You don't understand what you were about to do. Ethan flinched, the tiniest recoil, like a man who realizes the door he's been bracing is actually on the other hinge. Do what? He asked, and his voice made him sound like his father for the first time in years. Mara's eyes softened at him and then settled back on Lila. This was the line. Spare the person, not the lie. Nobody needs to collect anything, she said, the words gentle but edged, the first note of a verdict approaching. Not today. Lila blinked hard. A shard of something like relief flashed and contradicted itself on the way through. She closed her eyes as if that might halt time. From the kitchen, a bell chimed once, someone plating a course the room wasn't ready to eat. The planner tapped her headset and murmured, Hold, to the void, to the oven, to the future. Mara placed the napkin she still held on the linen of the cocktail round, right beside the silent clipper, as if laying down both prop and pretext. She stepped closer so only the circle could hear her. Lila, she said, the name not a scold, not a caress, a summons. No one's going to humiliate him. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then back. This doesn't have to be a spectacle. Lila's chin trembled. Then don't, she gestured vaguely toward Mara's bag, the air, the idea. Words failed her again. Mara nodded once, decision clicking into place like a safety belt. She looked at Ethan, at Daniel, at Rosie's tie, at the guests standing on hearts, not feet. Then she turned to the nearest mic, not to claim the room but to make her voice carry evenly when it needed to. Her fingers touched the stand, metal whispered under skin. The bandleader, reading the cue, lifted his palm and held the room at the exact volume of listening. Mara didn't speak yet. She scanned the faces, The ones she loved, the ones she barely trusted, the strangers who would carry versions of this story home, and chose a sentence that could hold the weight. Her mouth opened, and the first words came out soft enough to lay on the back of a child's hand without startling it. "No one needs to collect anything today," she said. The words fell like a cloth over a mirror, and in the second before their meaning landed, every person in the room leaned forward toward the sentence, toward the cliff, toward the thing that would make sense of everything that had been humming at the edges all afternoon. Chapter 8. The Wife Speaks. "No one needs to collect anything today," Mara said, and the words settled over the hall like a cloth over a mirror. The planner stilled, headset cord a black line against her throat. The bandleader's horn gleamed dumbly on its stand. A server adjusted a tray a centimeter, as if sound could knock it loose. Lila flinched. Her fingers, still cramped around the silent clipper, opened and closed once like they were relearning air. She looked from Mara's face to the head table, toward the tote, then back, a moth triangulating heat. Ethan's eyes searched the sentence for handholds. "Collect what?" he asked, voice soft as if not to wake something sleeping between them. Mara didn't look at him yet. She kept her gaze on Lila, the way you look at a skittish animal you're trying not to startle. "You thought you could stop it if there was nothing left to take?" she said, gentle as linen. "But there's nothing anyone needs from Rosie tonight. Not a curl. Not a ribbon. Not a single hair." The room didn't breathe. The mill seemed to lean in its own bones. A fork slid off a side plate somewhere and pinged once on wood. The sound made a line straight to Lila's spine. "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked, firmer now. The question reached for his wife, then his mother, landed on neither, hovered. Mara's hand, steady, ring catching the light, lifted from her side and lowered again. "The lab already had enough," she said. The word lab changed the temperature of the air. A guest near the doors took a half step back without meaning to. The photographer's thumb found the shutter out of habit, then eased away. Daniel felt Rosie's breath tangle and smooth under his palm. "Cookies in," he whispered at her temple. "Dandelion out." She obeyed, the tiny muscle at her jaw unclenching one notch. Lila swallowed hard. "You went behind our backs," she said, but the accusation couldn't find its footing. It came out tiny, tinny, a toy of a sentence. Mara shook her head once. "I sent what had already shed," she said. "What people leave behind when they live together. From the brush at our house." Her eyes flicked to Lila's hairline, then away. "From the hat you borrowed last month. From the sweater you lint-rolled for me when you came by. Enough to be sure, or sure enough to stop guessing." Ethan's mouth opened, closed. "When?" It was the smallest word he had that could hold all the others. 2 weeks ago," Mara answered. "I prayed every day it would make a fool of me." The planner found herself nodding once, as if you nod when someone says prayed. The bandleader watched Mara like she was conducting a piece only she knew the ending of. Lila took an involuntary step toward Mara. "You are going to announce it here," she said, pleading wrapped in accusation now. "You were going to shatter him in front of strangers." "No," Mara said. "I was going to tell my son the truth wherever he would hear it." She let that sit. "I hoped it would be in a quiet room. Without microphones. Without cake." The cake, tall and careful at the far end of the room, looked suddenly absurd, a beautiful building in a city learning about earthquakes. Ethan's eyes flicked to the tote on the head table, to Mara's phone face down beside it, as if the truth might vibrate through leather. "Did they send something?" He heard his own voice rise on the last word like a child's. Mara nodded. "This afternoon." Rosie shifted, the tie bandana sliding a little. Daniel tightened it, 2 fingers light at her temple. He watched Lila out of the corner of his eye, how her breath sawed under the silk of her dress, how her hands, free of the clipper now, the second shooter had lifted it away like a hot pan, kept searching for work and finding none. "What does enough mean?" Ethan asked, and he could hear how he sounded and could not change it. "Enough for what?" "For certainty," Mara said, and the word didn't echo, it simply deepened the room. "For answers. For us to stop building a life on guesses and nerves." Silence pressed against the Edison bulbs until they seemed to hum. Lila shook her head as if she could dislodge the shape the night had taken. I wasn't trying to hurt her, she said, and her gaze cut to Rosie with a flash of true horror at what she'd done. I was trying to buy time. The admission hung there, raw and inadequate. I didn't want him to be. She stopped, groping for a noun that wasn't humiliated. Mara's eyes softened. I know, she said. That's why I'm speaking, not shouting. Ethan took a step toward Mara, then another. Up close, she saw the boy he'd been. Scraped knees, stubborn jaw, the way he used to ask, is it going to hurt? Before a shot. If you have the email, he said, say it to me. Not around me. Mara looked, finally, directly at her son. The room tipped toward them. She glanced once at Rosie, who was listening without understanding, at Daniel, whose hand didn't leave the small of the child's head. Then she looked back to Lila, as if offering one last invisible courtesy. Do you want to? Lila's lips parted, closed. She shook her head so slightly it might have been a tremor. Mara nodded once, decision locking like a seatbelt. The results came today, she said to Ethan, speaking each word as if it were glass. I've read them. Twice. Ethan held her gaze. His throat worked. And? Mar drew a breath. Across the room, the trumpet's bell caught the light like an eye. The planner lifted a hand and held even the kitchen at bay. Daniel felt Rosie's small fist tighten in his lap. And I will tell you, Mara said, voice steady as a hand on a back in the dark. But not to a room. She looked at the mic, then angled it gently away, so it faced the ivy instead of faces. Then she stepped closer to her son until only he could hear the next sentence, close enough for the rest of the room to feel the words arriving without yet knowing their shape. The bandleader, without lifting his instrument, exhaled a long, low breath that sounded like a note. The lights didn't flicker, but it felt as if they might. Mom! Ethan whispered. Mara leaned in, truth bright and heavy and almost at his ear. And the room, which had been holding its breath for what felt like an hour, braced itself for the sound of a life being named. Chapter 9. The First Collapse. Mara leaned in until her lips were a breath from Ethan's ear. The room saw only the angle, the intimacy of a mother steadying a son. The words themselves traveled in a thread meant for one person. Rosie isn't your blood, she said. The sentence entered him like cold water. Ethan didn't move at first, then the tiniest sway, as if a floorboard had given under his weight. He inhaled wrong and coughed once, quiet, the way people do when they're drowning in a glass of air. His hand found the back of a chair and held. What? He asked, but not to clarify, because language asks that question before the heart does. Mara's eyes didn't flinch. I sent what had already shed. The lab wrote this afternoon. I prayed it would say I was wrong. She let him see the regret, not the shame. I am so sorry for the timing, not for the truth. Across the circle, the bandleader felt the shift without hearing the words. He rested 2 fingers on the trumpet's valves like a blessing. The planner's walkie crackled softly. She palmed it silent and stepped 2 inches to widen the privacy bubble. Ethan's gaze drifted, unfocused, to the braid on the stool, to Daniel's tie knotted at his daughter's head, to Lila's empty hands. He found a sentence and offered it like a wounded thing. How long have you known? I didn't know, Mara said. I suspected. 2 weeks ago I mailed what I had. Today I read it twice. Ethan's jaw worked, then stilled. He nodded once, the kind of nod you give a surgeon who has said the necessary and irreversible. Lila took a step toward them, hand half lifted. Ethan, it wasn't a defense. It was a wish to turn back a clock that didn't exist. He looked at her for the first time since the whisper. Did you know? He kept the question small, as if size might spare them. Lila's mouth opened and closed. Yes, she said, so quietly it felt like an apology to the floor. I found out months ago. Her eyes flicked to Rosie, horror brightened her face. I never meant to hurt her. She gestured helplessly toward Mara's tote, to the napkins squared there like a harmless thing. I panicked. Daniel, feeling Rosie's breath steady under his hand, slid his palm from the back of her head to her shoulder and squeezed twice. She pressed back with a small, practiced strength. Pirate rules, he whispered, and she hiccup laughed, the sound of fragile bridge between worlds. A murmur stirred at the edges of the room, human-tide meeting news it couldn't yet name. The planner lifted her hands, palms soft, and the tide receded half a step, shame-faced and grateful for instruction. Ethan rubbed his lower lip with his thumb, a habit from childhood when answers were hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked Lila, still gentle, the last of his carefulness. "Why today this?" Lila swallowed. "I kept trying to find the least damaging door," she said, voice fraying. "I thought if we got through tonight, if everything looked right, we could control how." She stopped, the word control tasting like metal. "When I saw your mother with the napkin, when I saw the email reflected in her glass, I thought she would do it here. I wanted to buy time." Her eyes went to the clipper the second shooter had set down like evidence. "I chose wrong." Ethan nodded again, an old man's nod in a young face. "You chose Rosie last," he said. Not anger, not yet, just a ledger entry that would not be erased. Mara lifted a hand as if to catch blame that didn't belong to the child. "This is on me for speaking here," she said. "But it would have been crueler to let the party turn into a memory we'd have to cancel retroactively." From the back, someone whispered, "Is the little girl okay?" And someone else replied, "Sure," and the word moved like a curtain. Ethan looked at his father. Daniel, still sheltering, met his son's eyes over Rosie's crown and gave the smallest nod. "I'm here for the part where you fall." Ethan didn't fall. Not yet. He straightened, an inch taller, as if the new gravity had lengthened him. He stepped to Lila until only honesty fit between them. "If you knew," he asked, "did you plan to tell me?" "Yes," she said, the yes breaking. "Just not like this. Not with microphones." He let out a breath that could have been a laugh in another decade. "There were always going to be microphones," he said softly, a private joke about their life that failed to lift either of them. He looked at Mara. "What do we do now?" "We tell the truth once," Mara said. "Cleanly." She flicked her eyes at the mic stand, then away. "Or we find a quiet room and do it there." He glanced behind him at the sea of faces pretending to study centerpieces. They would not unknow what their eyes had learned. He thought of speeches lined up like dominoes, of photos that would never look the same once you knew which adult was carrying a secret in his teeth. "Here," Ethan said, surprising himself. He turned to Lila. "I won't let you be alone when it lands. But I won't let it miss me either." Lila blinked hard, relief and terror arriving at the same moment and colliding. She nodded, the movement microscopic. He faced Mara. "Say it," he asked, voice steadying. "So I don't have to do it alone." Mara searched his face for any hint of doubt she could honor. Found none. She touched his shoulder, then she stepped to the mic and angled it back toward the room. The bandleader lifted his hand. The bass player's palm flattened against strings, stopping even the ghost of vibration. The mill listened in its beams. Mara wrapped her fingers around the stand as if it might try to float away. She looked first at Rosie, then at Lila, then at Ethan. Her mouth parted. And just before the word left her, the radiator at the far wall popped. Sharp, domestic, absurd, like a starter pistol misfiring at the line. The room flinched together, bodies trained by a common reflex. "Okay," Mara said into the mic, voice clear, untheatrical. "Here is what is true." Chapter 10. The Truth, Unfolding. "Here is what is true," Mara said into the mic. The stand carried her voice without amplifying it into spectacle. The planner had turned the gain down to something human. "We love this child," Mara began, eyes on Rosie first, "and nothing that follows changes that." A breath. "This afternoon I received results from a lab. They say Rosie is not Ethan's biological daughter." The room didn't gasp, it tightened. Glass stems pinched between fingers, shoulders cabled, the mill's old beams seeming to lean to hear. Somewhere, ice settled in a bucket with a private clink. Ethan faced the crowd only long enough to intercept their eyes. "She is my daughter," he said, voice low but clean. "That part isn't up for debate." His hands were steady, his knees were not. Mara angled the mic away from Rosie so the words would have to cross a field of adults before they could ever find her. Lila's choice a moment ago, she didn't look at the clipper, she didn't need to, was panic, not vanity. She feared this truth would be sprung like a trap in front of you. I'm sorry for the place, not for the truth. The bandleader rested his palm on the bass's shoulder. The instrument answered with a sympathetic hush. The photographer lifted his camera, then lowered it. Some pictures belonged only to memory. Lila attempted words twice before any sound came. I'm sorry, she said at last, and the syllables landed crooked but real. She turned from the room to the child she'd hurt. Rosie, I am so sorry. Her throat worked. I was trying to stop something and I broke the wrong thing. Rosie peered out from Daniel's jacket, tie bandana slanted like a pirate's crown. It buzzed, she whispered, as if reporting weather. Daniel kissed her temple. It's off now, he said. All the buzzing's off. A murmur lapped the edges, questions with no mouths. How long? The planner raised her hands, palms gentle. Not here. Not like this. Guests remembered they had brought their better selves and held them up. Mara did not fill the silence. She let it teach. Then she said, this family will speak to each other, not about each other. Tonight, no one approaches Rosie with grown-up questions. You can bring her cake or kindness. Nothing else. Daniel felt the room obey, some out of grace, some out of the relief of being told what to do. He loosened the tie bandana a hair and murmured, Captain's orders, and Rosie's mouth twitched, a small, saving trick of a smile. Ethan stepped closer to Lila until his voice would not travel far. Did you plan to tell me? He asked, for him, for the ledger. Ever? Yes, Lila said. The yes shook. Just not with microphones. From the back, a guest's whisper tried on cruelty. So who's the father? And died, shamed by the way the bandleader glanced up and the planner's head turned, slow as a lighthouse lamp. We're done performing, Mara said to the room, soft and final. We'll take a short break. Then we'll eat, and those who can hold quiet will stay. The mic clicked low as she turned it from faces to Ivy. The hall exhaled, a tired animal settling. Servers moved like water, clearing nothing important. The cake waited at the far table, ornate and ridiculous and exactly what a night like this suddenly needed. Ethan looked at Daniel. Daniel nodded. We move now, we don't run. Ethan turned to Lila. Outside, he said, not harsh. By the loading dock. We finish this as people, not pictures. Lila wiped her palms down her dress as if she could iron the tremor out. She glanced once at the black case, closed, shamed, and left it on the linen like a tool that had confessed. They began to thread through the room, Daniel with Rosie anchored on his hip, Mara, a quiet metronome beside them, Ethan and Lila 2 steps ahead, pulled by a door and the cold behind it. The bandleader lifted his trumpet but didn't play yet. He waited for the door to open, for the draft to declare the scene change. The mill listened. At the threshold, Ethan paused, hand on the bar, not to steady himself, to mark the moment. He looked back once at the stool, at the braid coiled on a napkin like a small, sleeping animal, and he understood. The next thing said would make the room and them into something new or something broken. He pushed the door. Winter rushed in, bright and merciless. The 4 of them stepped into it, and the room, left holding its breath again, leaned toward the loading dock as if the walls had ears. Chapter 11, Everything in the Open. Winter slapped their faces. The loading dock was a rectangle of cold metal and gritty light, the river dark and loud beyond the guardrail. A vent fan throbbed overhead, steady as a bad heart. Someone had smoked out here earlier. The smell clung to the damp boards. Daniel shifted Rosie higher on his hip and tucked his coat around her, the tie bandana peaking like a brave flag. Her cheek pressed into his collarbone. Her breath came in small clouds that rose and broke. Mara pulled the door until it was almost shut, enough to damp the room's murmur, not enough to cut them off. She stood between the light and the cold, a hinge. Ethan kept both hands on the rail, knuckles chapped white. Lila rubbed her arms, then forced her hands to be still. Without the music, her dress sounded like paper when she moved. Say it again, Ethan said, not because he hadn't heard but to land on something solid. Mar didn't make him turn. The test says Rosie isn't your blood, she repeated. It changes nothing about who you are to her. He nodded once, swallowing hard, eyes on the black water. Who is he? Lila flinched at he, arms tightening across her ribs. Can we not? She glanced at Rosie, small and listening even in shock. Not with her here. Daniel kissed the top of Rosie's head. Captain needs warm, he murmured. Cake recon mission? She nodded without really nodding, exhausted. He looked at Ethan. I'll take her in, make a fort out of napkins. 2 minutes. Ethan's gratitude showed as a long blink. Thank you. Daniel brushed past, and as he opened the door, heat and trumpet and light spilled over them, then folded shut. They were 3 now. Ethan faced Lila. How long have you known? The words shook but didn't splinter. Since spring, Lila said, voice hoarse. Her pediatrician flagged a blood type thing that didn't add up. I took a test. Alone. She made herself meet his eyes. We were on a break when she was conceived. I told myself timing was messy, not impossible. A breath. I told myself a lot of things. Who is he? Ethan asked again, quieter. Someone from that month, Lila said. It wasn't a relationship. He moved. He doesn't know. I thought protecting you and Rosie meant keeping the door shut before it ever existed. She tried to smile and failed. I was wrong about almost everything that matters. Mara's hand hovered at Ethan's shoulder, then rested there, a light pledge. I should have chosen a different place, she said. But not a different truth. Lila's eyes filled the way glasses fill, from the bottom up, suddenly heavy. I wasn't trying to humiliate you, she told Mara, and then to Ethan, or you. When I saw your mom with the napkin, when I saw the email reflected in her glass, she choked on a laugh. I thought if there was no hair to take, we could get through tonight and tell you gently tomorrow. I thought I could buy one clean memory. The clipper, Ethan said, and the syllables were more sorrow than judgment. I broke the wrong thing, she whispered. He nodded, a tired man's nod in a young man's body. You were scared. He stared at the river. I'm furious. And I feel empty. And also like the ground didn't move at all because she's still the person who falls asleep on my chest watching cartoons. His mouth twisted. All of that is true at once and I hate it. Lila reached, stopped, fingers curling back into her palms. What do you want me to do? The question wasn't a trap. It was a request for orders from the person she had wronged. Apologize to her, he said immediately. First thing before anything adult. Not with excuses. Then we figure out the rest in a room with a door and a therapist. He turned to Mara. And we don't perform any more of this tonight. Mara nodded. Agreed. Ethan blew into his hands. The cold stung his eyes into honesty. I will be her father, he said to Lila, to Mara, to the metal and the river. That doesn't end because a lab says a word. But I don't know what I am to you right now. He let the quiet hold that sentence like a plate you don't trust. We will not tie ourselves to a lie to save face. If we stay a family, it will be because we can tell this story without flinching. Lila's shoulders shook once. I can tell it, she said. I can sign whatever makes it clean. I can live with the room thinking I'm a villain if she doesn't have to carry that weight. She won't, Mara said. Because we won't make her. The door eased open. Daniel's head appeared in the crack. Captain reports the cake is mountainous and the napkin fort structurally sound, he stage whispered. She asked if pirates can have sprinkles. He took in the triangle of faces, the cold on their cheeks. We can do the next part inside with chairs. Ethan wiped his eyes with his knuckle like steam off glass. Yeah, he said, voice steadier. He looked at Lila. You talk to her. I'll stand there. Then we eat cake and we get through the next hour without making any new wounds. Lila nodded, fear and relief crossing her face like birds changing direction. Okay. They turned together. When the door opened, warmth pushed back against them, the trumpet laying a soft blanket of notes over the hum. Just inside, Rosie sat at a table fortress, napkins tented, a fork like a flagpole, wide-eyed but quieter, Daniel's coat still around her shoulders. Lila stopped at the edge of the fort and knelt so low her dress touched the floor. Rosie, she said, voice small and clear, I hurt you. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I will not touch your hair without asking again, That's a promise. Rosie studied her like a weather change. It buzzed, she said. It did, Lila said. And it won't again. She looked up at Ethan, then back to the small judge. Can I sit next to you while you eat cake? The beat. Then a tiny, regal nod. Only if you don't take my sprinkles, Rosie warned, the mercy of children arriving without ceremony. I won't, Lila said, crying and smiling at once. They're yours. Ethan slid into the other chair, knees close to the fort. He met Mara's eyes over the paper ramparts. The look said, later we break. Right now we hold. Mara touched his shoulder in answer and, with Daniel, began the quiet logistics of plates and slices and making space for the hard thing to share a table with the sweet. The band found a slow standard. The planner dimmed the house lights a shade as if to say, we are not hiding, we are softening the edges so people can breathe. Ethan lifted his fork. To pirates, he said. Pirates, Rosie echoed, and the room, which had braced for spectacle, learned how a family chooses the next right thing in a life they did not plan. Chapter 12, What They Choose. Forks make small, brave sounds against plates. The band lays a low, woolen melody over the room. No spotlight, just warmth. In the fort of napkins, Rosie spears a sugared petal with grave ceremony. Sprinkles skitter like tiny marbles and settle. Daniel holds the plate steady, the tie bandana slightly askew, a ridiculous crown that keeps her from feeling the air on the raw stripe. The planner drifts to the mic and tilts it away, voice barely above a whisper to the staff. No speeches. Candids only. The photographer nods, relief and purpose sharing his face. He raises the camera not to hunt but to witness. Hands, eyes, bread being torn, a grandfather's sleeve dabbed at a child's lip. Clicks that sound like breathing. Mara moves through the space with the economy of someone who has been here before, rooms where truth arrives buckling the furniture. She collects abandoned glasses from the danger line, straightens a chair so no one trips. On the linen near the ivy wall, the braid still lies coiled on its napkin like a small, sleeping animal. She goes to it. For a second she just looks, at the ribbon, at the kink where it used to curve against a shoulder. Then she folds the napkin over it, not evidence now but an heirloom to be returned when the owner wants it back. She tucks it into her bag and zips the leather as quietly as a promise. Lila sits on the edge of the fort, palms flat against her knees to keep the tremor from showing. Good, she asks Rosie, not sure if she is allowed this simple word. Rosie studies her like weather, then slides the plate to share. No stealing, she decrees. No stealing, Lila repeats, voice wobbling on the easy vow. She takes one crumb, the exact diameter of forgiveness she has earned. Ethan stands at the corner of the table, hands loose at his sides. He looks like a man waiting for a verdict he already knows. Mara steps into his line of sight, not to block it, to soften it. Breathe, she reminds, a smile with edges. He does, and the breath lands. The planner approaches Ethan with a question folded to fit the moment. We can dim a little more, she offers, and cue dinner whenever you say. Dim, Ethan answers. People are here. He glances toward the mic as if it might spring back to life. No more announcements. Understood. She touches his arm, a human checkbox, and glides away. A server slides a glass of water to Lila's elbow and disappears before gratitude can make things heavier. The band shifts to something older, softer. The bass is a heartbeat stitched back into the room. The second shooter circles once, sees the black case on the linen round, and, after a beat of respect, covers it with a spare napkin, the way you cover sharp edges when children run. The photographer lowers himself to Rosie's eye line. One picture, he asks. Pirate captain's choice, funny face or brave face. Rosie considers, then sticks out her sprinkle-stained tongue and throws a two-fingered salute. The image catches Daniel's cracked grin and Lila's surprised laugh in the same frame. It will be the only photograph from tonight that gets printed and stuck to a fridge. Mara returns, touches Daniel's shoulder, then looks at Ethan. You have a place to put the hard things? She asks, meaning a room, a counselor, a calendar. Ethan nods once. Tomorrow, he says. The word isn't avoidance this time, it's triage. Tomorrow starts with pancakes, Daniel adds, deadpan, like a man calling an audible the family recognizes. Rosie brightens at that. Simple architecture for a morning that hasn't earned anything fancier. Not the planned courses, not the exact forks for the right plates. Food arrives in the shapes comfort takes when ceremony has been folded away. Warm things, easy things, bread that tears without arguing. The hall exhales with them. Lila turns to Rosie. "Can I fix your ribbon?" she asks, hands visible, request a bridge instead of a leash. Rosie lifts her chin. Lila ties the bow the way Daniel did. 2 loops, firm, no flourishes, and steps back. "Captain rules," she says. Rosie nods solemnly, tribunal satisfied. The planner reappears at the edge of the fort. "If you want one photo as you are," she says to no one and everyone, "we can do that. No posing." Ethan looks at the tie bandana, at Lila's damp lashes, at his mother's tired mouth, at his father's freckled hand. He nods. They gather, not in rows, just near. Daniel kneels with Rosie in his lap. Lila takes the child's free hand without gripping. Mara stands behind them, one palm on Ethan's back, the other holding nothing, finally. The photographer breathes like he's afraid to spook a bird. "Right there," he whispers. That's the picture. When the plates are empty and the band has run out of songs that feel like blankets, the families find their coats. The mill's door opens to the kind of cold that cleans you without forgiving you. The night holds its old, indifferent stars. On the steps, Ethan hugs his parents. It lasts a heartbeat longer than habit. "Thank you for not letting it be later," he says into Mara's shoulder. She presses her cheek to his hair. "Thank you for letting it be now," she answers. Lila lingers with Rosie at the curb, buttoning the coat carefully around small arms. "I'll braid it for you when it grows back," she says, not as a plea, as a plan. "If you want." Rosie considers, then shrugs inside the coat like a sea creature retreating into safe shell. "Maybe," she says, which is more mercy than many adults deserve. They part at the cars with ordinary lines. "Text me, drive safe, don't forget the leftovers," because ordinary is a rope across a river. Before Daniel slides Rosie into her seat, Mara reaches into her bag and places the folded napkin in his palm. It has a weight out of proportion to its size. He nods, a private pact. Rosie watches through half-shut eyes. "Is that mine?" she mumbles. "When you want it," Mara says. "When you're ready." "Okay," Rosie says and sleeps. The mill windows glow behind them like a row of small, tired suns. Inside, staff stack chairs in a softened rhythm. Someone hums the last 8 bars without knowing they're doing it. The black case sits under a napkin, muted, an object in timeout. Ethan closes the trunk, looks up at the sky, then at Lila across the lot. They meet in the middle, not for a kiss, just to stand in the same cold. "We'll tell it once," he says, "and we'll tell it right." Lila nods, a shiver running through the word right that is not from the air. Engines start. Headlights sweep the brick. As Daniel's car pulls away, Mara twists to check on Rosie and finds the child's hand still resting on the knot of the ridiculous tie, like she knows what holds is not fabric but the people who keep tying it. And if anyone years from now asks what broke the room into silence, they'll be told about a sentence spoken softly into a crowd that had braced for spectacle. Not a curse. Not a performance. Just the clean edge of truth, set down where it could do the least harm and the most good.